Welcome, Lane, to another episode of Tatum Talks, the official podcast of Kelvin Tatum himself. And Kelvin is here. And we're looking at a couple of different areas of Speedway. Soon we'll talk about the Speedway Grand Prix, because that's heading into the final throes now. And certainly for Belle Vue fans, they have very much a horse in the race. Brady Kurtz, have we got a proper title challenge on our hands for the first time in a long time to Bartosz Zmarzlik? Certainly looks like that. And we'll look at that in a few moments. But first of all, we'll start by talking about British Speedway and the ROWE Motor Oil Premiership. At the time of recording this, I'll be honest, because you probably want a marker as to where we're talking about. The 19th of August, we just had the fixtures on Monday night. And some things have been finally decided there. So it's a good time to catch up, Kelv, because we now know for sure who the four teams will be. Mathematically, it is beyond all doubt that we know the four sides in the playoffs who will be battling for the league title once we get into September, and that is Ipswich, Leicester, Sheffield and Belle Vue. In no particular order at this moment in time, but probably no surprises, but now it's all assured, but without doubt, the four best sides of the season are through, and no dramas either. There's plenty of breathing space before the end of the season. No last-minute dramas. But yeah, we have your final four destinations, Kel.
Yes, and as you say, no real surprise. It's been on the cards for some time. Kings Lynn were the ones that mathematically may well have been able to force their way in, but they just haven't been able to find the form to do that. It's a shame, actually. I thought Kings Lynn would actually be a threat for the top four this time around in 2025. They had that experienced team, no real number one, effectively, but always going to have a strong reserve. But unfortunately, it isn't the Dad's Army that we saw a few years ago with Peterborough. It just hasn't transpired with Rob Lyon. But yeah, the top four are the top four. It's all building up quite nicely. 3 matches last night, 2 convincing wins, and then a tight tussle between Ipswich and Leicester at Leicester last night, and that's interesting. I've got some thoughts on those two teams, but no, I think, as you say, the top 4 teams in the country. What way round they'll finish, tough to call. I sense Ipswich may just finish top, but Leicester have got a few matches in hand, and Leicester are this team that just keeps surprising everybody a bit, you know. They've won away at Ipswich, they've won away at Sheffield, and they're very good at home. They've got a leader in Frick who is inspired this year. It's not just been like 5 or 6 weeks, it just keeps going on, doesn't it? This form that he has. And when you've got a rider like that in your camp, it tends to inspire others. Becker's back, he'll get better. Yeah, interesting looking team. But yeah, looking forward to it now.
Yeah, we'll look at the teams in more detail in a sec. We'll just start by talking about Kings Lynn, actually, because it was... Obviously, they were the side that, as you say, you kind of tipped them at the start of the season to do well, but injury really has been their thing. Niels Christian Eversen's been on the sidelines for a point. I think they've had 1 or 2 riders miss a few matches here and there, but particularly Ben Cook, who was injured in the very early stages, riding for Kings Lynn against Leicester, had a heavy crash. It was a complicated injury. Yeah. It wasn't an easy one to come back from. He rode over here, found it was very hard to do, opted to, in the end, we ended up getting banned because he was riding in Poland. But a big difference between riding the Adrian Flux Arena, for example, where it's quite grippy, different sort of material, different demands on the body, versus racing in Poland, where he found it a lot easier. But he has since come back, and certainly from Monday night, we saw just what they've been missing, really. You know, getting nine points, and I think it was paid 10, and he was electric out of the starts. And you know, that is a rider that any team's going to miss. A rider getting in double figures on a regular basis. And yes, he was riding at reserve, but wherever. I mean, he started at number 1, didn't he? I think. Rob Lyon made the point that they missed him, and maybe he was out for just a few weeks too long, you know, for them to mount a real challenge to get in the mix. Yeah. Because when that team's firing together, they're hard to beat, especially on the home circuit.
Yeah, as I say, that was a big blow, and with the shortage of riders, he wasn't easily replaced. Like, you know, they probably weren't quite sure how long he was going to be out for. Probably the rider himself didn't know initially, but it was, as you say, a complicated injury that took some time. Riding anywhere in the UK, to be honest, is more demanding physically than riding on the continent, particularly in Poland these days. But you can point the finger at injuries. I think other teams have had injuries, but have managed to keep going. And I would argue that I think that Rob Lyon would suggest that they would have coped a little better with their injuries, but it hasn't been. It just hasn't been, and the torture for Kings Lynn continues. A team that I think a lot of people would like to go well and look to make the top four. They seem to have put a team together this year that might have done it, but they haven't, and that's sad. I'd like to see Keith Chapman. He won't thank me for saying this because I'm sure he's heard it before. But the track at the Adrian Flux there up in Kings Lynn is a brilliant track. It always has been. The shape of it, the DNA of that track has always been terrific. But the surface he uses, I'm not a fan of it, and I think quite a few other people aren't either. I think if he could integrate something else with it, it would improve some of the racing there at times, and maybe make it slightly less physical, because it is a challenge. You see it, riders do tend to get themselves in a bit of trouble. You only have to ask Jason Doyle that. He ended up the wrong side of the fence, but no, they're not going to make it. So a disappointing season for the Stars.
Yeah, and walking on it last night, it is one of those tracks, and you don't see this too often now. So you walk around Sheffield, for example, or even Belle Vue, this doesn't really happen. But it was one of those where you are gaining inches on your height as you walk around, and you feel like you come off with wearing clown shoes because you got that much of the material stuck to your shoes. Sure. It really is a sticky old surface, and it's something you say you don't see it so much.
No, it's something back in the day when I was riding, it wasn't that way. It was regular shale, and as I say, it was quite different to ride on. But in recent times, that's the way it's been. I think it's biased a little bit more towards the stock cars, and which obviously financially is beneficial to the club and to Keith. But it is a bit of a compromise, I think, for Speedway. But that's the choice, and that's what riders have to deal with.
Certainly no problem for Chris Harris, though. He scored a full maximum on Monday night. So Bomber is on great form at the minute, and he's shaping up for it. Obviously, with Kings Lynn out of the race, if anybody does need the SOS, then play off Bomber. It could be back in the game again, though, that said.
Yeah, he is a remarkable character, Chris Harris, isn't he? His enthusiasm, he rides a lot. He rides, obviously, for Glasgow, Kings Lynn, he does world long track, grass tracks. He guest books everywhere. How on earth he manages to actually logistically get from A to B to C to D is it's amazing. And he's not a young Speedway rider anymore. He's been doing it for a long time. But you're right, I'm sure he'll be chuffed to bits to get a call up for the playoffs and try and win us again with somebody else. But fair play to him. And those sort of conditions, actually, he's always thrived on throughout his whole career. When it's challenging, when other people don't fancy it, Chris just goes for it. And, it's fair play to him. And that's why he's so popular, isn't he? Fans love him. Yeah.
Always entertaining to see. You never have a dull meeting with Bomber involved, that's for sure. And I'm sure it's not the last we've seen of him at Premiership level somewhere or another this season. So looking at the full shake-up then, Ipswich, they've been out there throughout the course of the season, really, and I think there's not been many days where they haven't been top, barring a few meetings here or there. But even then, when the fixtures have evened out in terms of matches in hand or whatever, they have regained their place there, and they are still 5 points clear at this moment. They've still got 3 meetings left to ride. And looking at Ipswich's fixture list, they've got Kings Lynn next on Thursday at Foxhall, but then home and away against Sheffield still to come, and that is obviously, with Sheffield also being in the top 4, going to be pivotal really for who finishes top.
Well, it will definitely have a bearing on it. Sheffield are very good at home, not quite as good away. I think Belle Vue have been similar recently, very good at home, although Ipswich did manage to beat them in a superheat a week or two ago. But they were missing Jamie Lidsey that night. But we've been around, apart from next Monday when we see Oxford and Kings Lynn on TNT. To be honest, we've been actually sort of looking at some of the dress rehearsals for the playoffs, and that particular home and away against Sheffield and Ipswich could very well be a semi-final. It could be a semi-final. We don't quite know which way it's going to end up, but I would think the favourites to finish top in the regular season are Ipswich. I would think so. Leicester are going along nicely, but I think for Sheffield, I think, as I say, they've made a change to the team. Nick Morris has come back in. Looks like he's going okay. He's going okay for Berwick. He got a lot of points. You helped me out there the other night, but
yeah.
I knew he got a big score, but he found it a bit more challenging at Allerton. But I think for him and the circumstances he found himself in and coming back into the sport, electing to come back into the sport, he's a rider that's going to be highly motivated to go well. So he could prove to be a positive for the Tigers.
Yeah, definitely. And I think coming in at this stage of the season, it's not easy, is it? Where riders are at full pelt, they've got their setups right, their fitness is up, they've got the confidence up, and coming back into a sport you haven't ridden for 2 years, and then finding yourself very quickly in the Premiership, riding, against the top of the table, is very much in at the deep end. And he does seem to be getting to grips with it and rediscovering what he's capable of, because Nick Morris was a strong rider, championship winner with Swindon and all that in his previous era. So get back to that fitness and that level of racing, and a valuable rider to be able to find at this stage.
Sure, and I would say right now he's riding on adrenaline, and he's over. He'll need to catch up, and he may just have one or two meetings where he just misfires. But generally, as I say, he has plenty of experience. He knows what he's coming to. It's not like he's somebody that's turned up out of the blue and doesn't have much British experience. So I think that will be a positive for the Tigers. Whether it's enough for them to get to the final, I don't know, actually. I don't know. We'll see.
We certainly will. Sheffield currently in third place in the ROWE Motor All Premiership, but they have actually ridden the fewest meetings of those in the top four. They've ridden 19, so they've still got 5 matches to go. They're on 34 points, so just 1 point behind Belle Vue, who have ridden 22. And for Sheffield, they've got Leicester next up on Thursday at Oleton. We'll come to that in a sec, because that sort of tale has a bit of a backstory to it. Then they've got Belle Vue away, Ipswich at home, and then 2 away trips to round things off, away at Kings Lynn and Ipswich. So we're finishing off in East Anglia in style. But Leicester next up is the interesting one, because Sheffield have been unbeaten in all competitions until Leicester came along, and then Leicester beat them in the Knockout Cup, and then Leicester beat them in the first round of the ROWE Motor All Premiership as well. So very much they've got the upper hand on the Sheffield Tigers, knocking them out of the Cup. Leicester, of course, going on to be the eventual winners of the KO Cup as well. So they've already got silverware in the bag, and Stuart Dixon looking to make it a double. Yeah,
they are very quiet. Well, Stuart Dixon, that's not quite the way to describe him quietly.
He's never been described as that before.
He'll let you know how well they're going, for sure. And he's quite a personality within the sport. But I think that Leicester Lions are doing remarkably well. And as you say, the confidence boost that you get by winning something is huge. They've got a rider that's having a fantastic season in Frick. They're back to full strength. And I quietly fancy them for the final. I do.
Well, they made it last year, didn't they?
So. Yeah, I quietly fancy them again for the final. And quite possibly the lessons learnt from last year and running out of steam, because Belle Vue just bulldozed them in the end. They just ran out of steam in the final. But I'd like to think probably that they will be a bit stronger, and it will be interesting to see. And that meeting on Thursday, where Leicester go back to Sheffield, they've got a bit of a hoodoo over the Tigers, will be interesting, because there's no doubt that Simon Stead and his troops will be extremely keen with the change to the team. Morris in, Etheridge in. They will not want to be continually beaten. They will want to make sure that they pick up a victory at home, and just sort of maybe just pause the halt of the Lions, because they've been very good again, very good. The champions Belle Vue are looking okay at home, but away they're definitely definitely vulnerable, very vulnerable, actually. So Leicester Lions are good home and away. They beat 49-41 last night, but they're going to these places and winning at Ipswich, and they've won at Sheffield, and they're so the aggregate. That's the key thing, isn't it? It's this aggregate. It's all very well winning by 20 points, but then you can get walloped by more than that, 30 points away from home. That flip flop that's going on, but they're actually holding their own everywhere, pretty much, and that's very useful.
And it's interesting as well that Sheffield haven't actually beaten Leicester at all this season. Their defeats were fairly heavy early on. They kept it closer the last time out when you were there with TNT. But nonetheless, it is obviously a bit of an issue for Sheffield, and they know that Leicester have got the better of them on every occasion, and in some big occasions as well, such as the Cup semi-final. And looking down the list of the riders, the focus of course goes to Max Frick, who was tremendous, but also the other riders like Sam Masters was fantastic. Ryan Douglas. And then you've got a former Sheffield captain in Carl Howarth as well, which perhaps the intel of knowing how the track develops. He didn't score a massive amount of points, but he got 5, paid 8. So not bad overall. And maybe these issues, Sheffield had Louis Kerr and Justin Sedgman scoring 1 point between them. That is probably the gap that Simon Stead's hoping is now filled with the signings they've made.
Well, it will be improved. Nick Morris scored. I think he scored 6 and a couple of bonuses. I think when I was there last time, maybe 6 paid 9.
He scored 6, I think, every time in the Premiership.
Yeah, so the thing, he's been fairly consistent, and that's he's pretty much doing his job. I think there was more to come, but I think if you're scoring 6, 7, 8, I think they'll be relatively happy with that. Jai Etheridge, anything picks up down at reserve, again, is a bonus. But for Leicester, when you come back, when they keep going back to a place, and those guys you've just mentioned, Frick, Douglas, Masters, they are confident going there. They know that they can score points, and they've got the bikes worked out, and they clearly walk into the place not intimidated at all. I think some teams do when they go to Allerton. I think they are a bit intimidated by that fast, slightly narrow track. You've got to ride on the fence. You've got to be quite brave around there. And I think the Leicester team don't seem to fear it at all. And the results prove that. So, to me, that'll be quite a dust-up, and there'll be a tension around that meeting. The playoffs, the teams are set. But I think from a psychology point of view, I think the Sheffield Tigers, if they want to win the championship this year, they need to win on Thursday night, and probably win with a bit of a swagger if they can, but that's not guaranteed.
Yeah, they'll be looking to send a message back to the Leicester Lions after everything that's happened between the two of them. But certainly, again, two sides to watch out for now, assured of the playoffs. Let's talk now about the Belle Vue Aces. Now, Belle Vue have got only a couple of meetings remaining. They've got Sheffield next up, which will be on Bank Holiday Monday, and that will be at the National Speedway Stadium. So Sheffield away for Sheffield heading away to the National Speedway Stadium, and then they've got Kings Lynn at the Adrian Flux Arena on the 28th to round out their campaign. So just 2 fixtures left for the Belle Vue Aces, but certainly obviously it makes no real difference now apart from finishing position, because they're assured of the playoffs, but not two sort of fairly difficult challenges really, because Sheffield are not going to mess about, and Kings Lynn, as we saw heading to the Adrian Flux Arena, is not an easy trip at the moment. Now they've got their full side back.
No, I think I expect them to win at home. I think that as long as they've got a full side, I think that they'll be. I can see them winning that match against Sheffield at home on Bank Holiday Monday. I think the one away on the 28th is, as you say, could be a bit tricky for more than one reason. Not just because Kings Lynn Stars have got a full side. That is only a couple of days before the next round of the World Championship. And for Kurtz in particular, he has to be human. He is human. It's going to be on his mind. He's in touching distance of the ultimate prize. So will he, at the Adrian Flux Arena, which is a challenging track, if he's back in the traffic, is he going to give it absolutely everything?
Yeah.
You know, that you know, I can't speak for him, but inevitably there will be. He has a big agenda, doesn't he? He has something else on his mind as well. Bewley seems to be able to put everything. He just looks at one meeting at a time. He's a bit more laid back. I'm expecting him to go well, but I would think Kings Lynn will win that. So I think Belle Vue Aces, and Mark Lemon has made this public. They are fragile away from home, and they need to look at themselves if they're going to win the championship this year. Because if they keep doing what they're doing away from home, they won't. They won't. You know, they got beat by 20 points the other night, and I just think that, yeah, they're not good enough over the aggregate. That's the thing. They're brilliant. They can be smacked. They can be fabulous at home, but they haven't travelled well this year. And if they're going to get to the final, if they're going to retain their title, they need to resolve that, and quickly.
And they probably, throughout the team, obviously they've got the strong, world-class riders in Brady Kurtz and Dan Bewley and what have you. But and they have really rescued them a few times, especially when it comes to the back end of a meeting, maybe a tactical, and then heat 13 and 15, and they've pulled it round with a few 5-1s to get themselves, pull those 10 or 12 points back and get them over the line. But elsewhere in the team, when they come up against sides that have got the second strings firing, the number twos, reserves piling on points and all that kind of stuff, particularly say Ipswich, you've got some strong reserves. That is where they really maybe are struggling elsewhere.
Absolutely, you've got Tate Ziski and Jake Mulford that often don't score the points that you would like. Norrick Bladorn is also a rider that frustrates. To me, he certainly, the last time I saw him, he didn't go particularly well. And to be honest, actually, the rider that really I couldn't understand why he had it was Zach Cook. Zach Cook at Sheffield, I think he scored 2 points. The previous week, when he was riding at home against Ipswich, he was outstanding. And that therein lies exactly what you've just mentioned about his second strings. Bladorn and Cook, they have to be more consistent away from home if you're going to keep it tight for the aggregate. You can't just rely on Kurtz and Bewley. You can't. They can't do it on their own. We saw them 3 times. Heat 11, I think it was, when he made a tack sub, and then they were in 13 and 15 as well, and they still got beat by 20 points. So there's a clear indication. And when you looked at the score chart that night, there was nothing coming from 4 riders. But that isn't going to do it. So they're going to have to get that resolved, and somehow those guys are going to have to up their game. But I don't see. I think Belle Vue, unless they get Cook being really consistent and Bladorn finding better form away from home, they'll struggle to make the final.
Will be interesting to see who ends up riding who. There is significance in those finishing positions. I've heard it said that whoever finishes top chooses. That's not the rule anymore.
No, it's not.
It's first versus fourth, second versus third, and that is the way for British Speedway in general. So Championship as well will be the same situation. So first versus fourth, second versus third in the semi-finals of the playoffs. And then, of course, the winners of those two will face each other in the grand final, slam dunk showdown, centrepiece to decide it all.
Yes.
At some point in probably October. You'll be getting your big coat on by then.
I'm hoping it will be in September, but let's keep our fingers crossed that it's the actual finals due to be run the last week of September.
Oh, right, okay.
It is, yeah.
Well,
the 22nd and the 25th of September, because the following week is the Speedway of Nations in Torrance. They'll be hoping that they can get it done then. Otherwise, it'll have to be pushed back to the second week of October. But let's hope that we have an Indian summer and the weather behaves. Yeah,
well, I saw that, I think it's Redcar in the Championship. They've still got to do the Knockout Cup semi-final. And they've scheduled that for like the last week of September, and I saw that. I thought, well, that means we're going right until the middle of October. Then whatever happens.
Well, the championship, but generally, the championship doesn't it?
It's not supposed to, but
it does. It does.
It does end up there.
It does.
I've gone to November before, Kelvin, in recent years.
Yeah. I can remember back in the day, I think I rode in a meeting on November the 1st or something like that. Ridiculous. I mean, it was crazy. But no, let's hope that we've had a good run with weather, really. And let's hope that we can continue on and get those meetings completed. Because not only is it good to, you don't really want people at the end of the season standing there freezing cold. And also conditions are compromised. So the meetings are compromised. You know,
the tracks
what I mean?
are not good,
and that's not great. You know what I mean? You're getting to the conclusion of the season, the showpiece of the season, and you don't want it to be raced in conditions that don't show the sport off to its full potential. So let's hope that's so. Anyway, keep our fingers crossed on that. I don't like the fact that there isn't more reward for topping the league in regular. I think you should be able to choose. You should have more reward for topping the table, definitely. And to take that away and just say you've got to go to the team that comes in fourth seems a bit odd to me. I'm not really sure why why that was changed, but it is the way it is.
I think it was for sort of clarity of being able to sort of second guess a little bit of who's going to be going where, and so people knew where they stood.
Flip side of that is that you then get meetings that don't mean anything running up to the playoffs.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. There is the lack of jeopardy in some of these meetings. You know, like this meeting, we're building them up. But if you've got two teams that are in the playoffs and can't fall out of the playoffs, so if they get beat, they drive away. Well, okay, no problem. But actually having more emphasis on where you finish in the top four, I think is something that should be looked at. I've actually looked at it because they do that in the IPL in the cricket. Where there is a lot of emphasis on where you finish in the top four before the playoffs. And it's actually quite an interesting system, but whether it would ever be adopted, I don't know. But it would make this period of the season really quite different. Every meeting would have more to race for.
I do think that there should be as well. That obviously it's different in different leagues. Where in the Championship everybody races each other once, but I feel for some clubs that their season ends a little bit prematurely, like for Kings Lynn. You know, they're going to be done by the first week of September. You still might have great weather for another 2 months potentially. That'd be good, whatever it is. I don't know what the solution is, but to extend the season out with in some form for some clubs, just because fans then get that regularity of knowing the Speedway is going to be happening in some sort of form or another, because you know you can have a situation where some teams get into the end of August and they're done, and the Speedway season continues, and that regularity of part of the battle is getting the fans to turn up on that regular sort of basis, whatever competition they're riding in, just to have something going on for those teams that find themselves with a
not an easy question to answer that one when you've got so few teams.
Indeed, and that will, of course, be something probably we'll talk about later on in the season, because we're losing Birmingham, and sad to see them go. They're going to be finishing down the bottom of the table in the ROWE Motor Oil Premiership, and sort of heading out with a bit of a whimper in some ways as well. There's no sort of big major, farewell to Birmingham or farewell to Perry Barr kind of, one-off event or anything like that. They're just going out with a regular league meeting.
Yeah, it's a shame, and I admire Nigel Tolley and his team to be running Speedway there, but it just simply hasn't been successful. I'm sure there are loads of reasons why, but Perry Barr, ever since it reopened, actually has never really caught fire again. It was closed for some considerable time. It's not a great place to watch. It's flat, isn't it? You haven't got. You're either indoors to get up and look down on the track, and outside you're at the same level, and that isn't terrific. But you never want to see tracks closing, but unfortunately their time is up, and as I say, there's no big individual meeting. There doesn't seem to be. They're not going out with any fanfare, which is, as you say, rather sad.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye on the ROWE Motor Oil Premiership, though. So final positions to be decided, and then we'll be into the playoffs in September, semi-finals, and then the finals, all to come. But it will feature Ipswich, Belle Vue, Sheffield, and Leicester in that final four shake-up. On to the World Championship situation. A bit of a break in the Grand Prix programme at this moment in time. Of course, we should be sat here talking about what happened in Cardiff last weekend. But,
yes.
Of course, Cardiff removed from the programme, hence why there's a bit of a gap in proceedings. But we're back underway with the Grand Prix series in the final weekend of August. And interesting situation. We've got Brady Kurtz there now, fighting tooth and nail with Bartosz Zmarzlik for the World Championship. We've got a challenge on our hands, and next up, just to add to the spice, it's Brady Kurtz's home track in Poland of Wroclaw.
Yes, Yeah, remarkable season on the World Championship, and Brady Kurtz has been the one that's just completely lit the championship up. Without him, I think Bartosz Zmarzlik could well have already have been mathematically out of sight, because, to his credit, Zmarzlik, he has kept, apart from the last time, he's been runner-up every time that Kurtz has been winning. He hasn't, and Kurtz must have been sort of scratching his head at times, thinking, well, what have I got to do? I keep winning, but this bloke keeps finding a way of finishing second. But he didn't in Riga, which he went straight through to the final. That was really quite a moment, and it could have flipped the World Championship in the favour of the champion, very much so, because with Zmarzlik going straight to the final, looking quite good actually in Riga, and of course Kurtz had to go through the LCQ. That's so easy to trip up when you have to win the LCQ to make the final, and fair play. The way that Kurtz rode at the back end of the night, in a tough night for everybody with the rain delay, not an easy track to overtake on. His LCQ race and the final were two heats that, you sort of think, well, can he? Can he? Can he really do it? Because I think there's been something lurking in the back of my mind. I thought, well, I think Zmarzlik will probably end up doing it, but we're witnessing a fantastic fight. But this week, the Wroclaw Grand Prix, his home track in Poland, it can go two ways. He can be, comfortable, feels really confident, goes out and blows everybody away. He's beaten Zmarzlik there in the league on more than one occasion. Or will the euphoria and the fact that there's been a long run-in, as you say, we're only actually by the time we get there, would have had one Grand Prix in 2 months. So huge. I don't think it's been ideal for Kurtz. I think it would have been better for the Grand Prix to keep coming for him, to keep doing it. Whereas maybe for Zmarzlik, possibly he'll be thinking, crikey, I just need to just think about it and then give it everything in the last two. I'm not sure. I think he'll be there or thereabouts. I think it's a fantastic conclusion to the championship. We haven't had it since 2021 when Artem Laguta did something similar, and it would be a sensation. It would be quite a remarkable. Apart from the very first time that the Grand Prix was won, this is history in the making of a rookie coming in and potentially being crowned world champion. It would be an outstanding effort. And Kurtz, to his eternal credit, Ian, not only is he ridden fabulously well under immense pressure, the way he's conducted himself. He isn't doing a lot of talking. He isn't doing a lot of, we're doing this. He hasn't got, ahead of himself. So I think the maturity, because he's not a young speedway rider, really young speedway rider. He's been around a while, and it's taken a while for him to get here. So I kind of think he's really appreciating it. And his starts have been the ones that the starting ability under the spotlight has been the difference. Because Zmarzlik hasn't been doing that, whereas Kurtz has been getting off the start when it really matters. And that is, there's no doubt that Mr. Zmarzlik will be concerned about that for sure. There'll be some soul searching going on there.
And for Brady Kurtz, and as you say, he hasn't done much talking, but when he has, he spoke very confidently. Yes. And, he has said that, we're in a battle. And he seems unfazed by everything, which I think is, he's taking it, the fact that it's, up against Bartosz Zmarzlik and he's won all these world titles and the pressure's on him. He doesn't seem to feel the pressure. He sort of said, well, I'm not going to let him get away, that's for sure. I'm going to be, a thorn in his side as long as this, as long as I can, keep getting the points on the board. And he's doing that. Yes. He's taking it for what it is. He's not, it doesn't, I think maybe Zmarzlik potentially expects other riders to feel the pressure and feel the heat, and he's obviously got that confidence, but Brady Kurtz just seems ice cold through it all.
So far he has. He's been remarkable. And that's why I think this will be another test coming up, possibly the biggest test so far, riding in front of your home audience, because in Poland, the weight of expectation is massive. Bartosz Zmarzlik, to be honest, he's accustomed to it. He's used to it. He's been carrying that mantle now for probably 6-7 years. And, he has and as world champion year on year, it's tiring because you have lots of commitments, lots of attention. People ask you to do things that can dilute your focus away from racing. Whereas for Kurtz right now, he doesn't have that. He can just 100% focus on winning the meetings. And as I say, this is another test coming up in Wroclaw, a track he knows extremely well. So does Zmarzlik. It's a great racetrack. It's a brilliant stadium. It's a really exciting prospect. I don't think we've had quite this sort of excitement, as I say, since Mr. Laguta actually eventually beat Zmarzlik in that shootout in 2021. But no, I'm excited about it, and I think that, as I say, without Kurtz this year, the World Championship would have been a lot poorer.
Certainly would. And next up into Wroclaw, and the wild card there will be Matt Sejanowski as well, who of course rides for Wroclaw in the Polish Extraliga.
Yeah.
Dan Bewley also is a home rider there along with Kurtz. So there are quite a few riders there that British fans can get behind, but all focus will be on that battle between Zmarzlik and Brady Kurtz going into that one with just the one round remaining after that. So it's hotting up now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's coming to a fabulous conclusion. As I say, we're having to be patient because we haven't had a lot of Grand Prix in the last 2 months. But as I say, the nearer we get to it, next week when we start getting really on the lead up into it, I think people will suddenly realise, well, what is actually about to happen. This is quite, and when you in regard to British fans, of course, Robert Lambert, who has had a quiet season, needs to finish well to make sure he's in the top 7. I'm sure he's very determined to do so. So Bewley and Lambert will be wanting to do well. Speedway of Nations is not far away, of course, so they'll want to have top form leading into that. But there's no question that the headline makers are going to be Zmarzlik and Kurtz, without doubt.
3 of those top 7 are already decided as well. Mathematically, Bartosz, Zmarzlik, Brady Kurtz and Freddie Lindgren are assured of a top 7 finish, whatever happens from here on. They can sit on the side and puff on a pipe and still be in the Grand Prix Series next year. Not that they will, of course, because they're athletes. But we also have the 4 qualifiers from the GP Challenge as well. And Leon Madsen is back in the Grand Prix Series for 2026. Kasper Warina, Dominik Kubera and Andrei Lebedev are all assured of their place in the Grand Prix. And a lot was said about the lack of Polish riders, perhaps for this year, and certainly a lot of crying about not getting wildcards and what have you last year. But certainly a couple have got through and qualified this year, so less of an argument on that front for the organisers. But interesting to see Leon Madsen back, because he's already come out and done an interview saying, he's back, he's hungry, he's missed it, and he's back to show that he's not there to make up the numbers. And sometimes that can be the thing for some riders, can't it? They get in the GP series, they fall out of it, they get back in and they're extra hungry again, and say, Ty Woofenden maybe an example, and they come back a different beast. Yeah,
well, Leon Madsen clearly was a bit miffed about the fact that he was overlooked, I would think, because he would probably have expected to have a wild card for 2025. That wasn't the case, but he had injury replacement for Doyle, got on the rostrum in Prague, did well, passed Kurtz actually in the LCQ to make the final. That was a great effort. On a track I don't think that was his favourite, so he rolled his sleeves up that night. He's back in. He's outspoken, Leon Madsen. He's made his position very clear. He's an experienced rider. He's probably mid to late 30s now. Been around a while. He's been a world number 2. He knows what it takes. And it's pleasing to hear that he's determined to go all out in 2026. Whether he's good enough and whether that transpires, who knows? But it certainly grabs the attention, and he's clearly very pleased to be back in. Just looking at the qualifiers, Kubera and Warina, I think Warina will be his first time in the World Championship. How he goes, I don't know. I don't think he's going to be winning many Grand Prix, but he's determined to go well. Kubera is an understated rider. They're just not quite as good as the previous generation. And they could have 4. Dudek is a rider that's having a fantastic season outside of the Grand Prix. He wasn't in the challenge. Probably would have qualified if he was, because he's just won the Polish Championship. And I think he needs to win the European Championship. And then they'll have 4, and then they can't argue. You know what I mean? As you say, any bleating that went on about 4 Aussies being in and only having 2 poles, and when you consider there's no Australian Grand Prix and there are 3 Grand Prix in Poland, I think they did have a bit of an argument, to be perfectly honest. But if they qualify by right, then you'd like to think that the PZM and the Extra Liga, well, not the Extra Liga, they don't care, but the PZM will be relatively happy. But Lebedev's, I think, will make the top 7. So Michael Jepsen-Jensen, I think, could well be back in the Grand Prix, which I think could be a good thing. And if Kubera turns on the style, then we could actually have 2 more Dames coming in with Anders Thompson as well. So that isn't cast in stone that. There's still a bit of mileage to go. But yeah, interesting. But riders like Kveik, Hülkenberg, there's another one that escapes me at the moment, missed out in the challenge. And you wonder whether their Grand Prix careers for the moment are, they're going to have to take some time out.
Yeah, and Jepsen Jensen's an interesting one because obviously he has been in the Grand Prix before, sort of fell away a little bit. But I know that I did an interview with him at the start of the season at the British Speedway press day. And this was, back in whenever, March, start of April or whatever. And he was then saying, Lou, this is the season that I'm here to get back in the Grand Prix series. And of course, he started out with Birmingham and that dropped away. But he was making no bones about the fact that he was on a mission this year to get back in the Grand Prix series, and perhaps it seemed like a wishful thinking, great to have that ambition sort of thing at the start of the season, but he really has fulfilled that on the Polish stage, the international stage. He's been there or thereabouts. Fair play to him.
He has. He's been outstanding in Poland for the last 2 seasons, and again this year he's one of the, if not the best rider, possibly one of the top 2 riders in the league on his average. He really has been very consistent. And I remember when he burst on the scene as a youngster and he won a Grand Prix as a wildcard in Voyens. He then went on to win the World Cup with Denmark and then inexplicably just sort of like drifted away from the international scene. It was almost like it was too much and the weight of expectation was too much. Now we're a decade later and he's an experienced rider. He's in his 30s and he just, like you say, that interview probably sums it up. He's probably realised, I've got to get my act together because if I really want to do it, I've got to do it now. And I think, to be perfectly honest, I think he's got every chance because I think Lebedev's will make the top 7. I can't. He'd have to have 2 absolute nightmares to drop out. So Michael Jepsen-Jensen will be relatively confident of being in the series next year, and I think he'll be a positive. Anders Thompson, back in it this year, hasn't qualified. A lot of these guys just sort of drift in and out of it. To me, they don't seem to be. They're determined to get into the series, but then don't actually have the consistency to stay there, which is a problem. But Dudek has been brilliant. I'd like to see Dudek back. I think Madsen and Dudek back in the series is a positive. I like that because I think they're Grand Prix winners. They know what it takes. They've been, both of them actually, former world number 2. So they won't be intimidated by the Grand Prix at all.
Yeah, Dudek has been going really well, as you say. He's been up at the top end of the Grand Prix series in the past, and perhaps a surprise. Obviously, it was one of the debates last year, wasn't it, about getting the wild cards and what have you. But I don't think anybody would have a complaint about Dudek getting a wild card because he's really earned it.
Oh, yeah.
Away from the Grand Prix series, as you say, he could actually qualify anyway, winning the SEC.
Yes, he could, and of course that will take the pressure off. Then the wild cards open up a bit for the organisers, but I would be very surprised if he didn't quite manage to. It takes the pressure off a little bit because Madsen's in. Is Madsen second, just behind him, I think. I think it's tight between them. I'm not exactly sure, but there's no doubt that Madsen won't be possibly quite as motivated as he once was to win the European Championship. He had 2 opportunities to make the Grand Prix, and he's taken the first one. But yeah, Dudek is a rider that. Again, just seemed to lose confidence and lose his way, dropped out of the Grand Prix series, but he's found his mojo in 25, and yeah, he'd be a good addition back in there. And we want a strong lineup. Ideally, you'd like to see Laguta and Saifutinov back in it. That ship seems to have sailed, but if you did have them as 2 wild cards because you already had 4 poles in, PZM would have not such a strong argument to stop it in some ways, if that were the case, but we'll see.
3 of the top 4 in the SGP are already in.
So it's looking good for Patrick Dudek. So they don't actually, you'd have to think. I'm going out on a limb here because I don't know the venues, but I think the last venue probably is in Poland. And for Dudek, he has every chance of winning that and clinching that European Championship. And then you will have 4 Polish riders qualified by right. And therefore, they would be in a position. And I just have this dream, Ian, that as a consequence of 4 poles in, they're not going to get 5. They're not going to give another pole a wild card. But would they then consider giving a wild card to Leguta or Sayfutinov or both of them? Because inevitably you're going to be then looking at riders as well. Do you invite back Martin Vashalik, who's missed out? He's the other one who missed out in Holstead in the challenge. Martin Vashalik, do you give him a wild card? Do you give another wild card to Kvek? Do you give another wild card to Hülkenberg? Well, those guys, Martin Vashalik might get one because he's been in the top 3 or 4 in the championship for a few seasons. But Hülkenberg has done nothing. Kvek, I think, possibly would benefit from a season away to just not have the pressure, maybe just gather himself and do what Dudek's doing, would do what Madsen's doing and come back stronger. And he's got age on his side. He's only 23 or 24. But I think that for me, what an opportunity. I don't understand the politics, but that would then, you imagine if you then put in Sayfutinov and Leguta, what a lineup for 26. You've suddenly got a Grand Prix that looks really tasty again.
It is the big question about Leguta and Sayfutinov, isn't it, as to what they're going to do
well,
about that.
I think there's always been an argument, Ian, sorry to interrupt, there's always been an argument, and I believe this is, the PZM have always fancied that if they put them in, it takes positions away from Polish riders. Because they ride with Polish, they ride in Poland, they live there. But if you've got 4 qualifiers by right, then the opportunity potentially is there, isn't it? It's there because they're not taking away anything from Polish boys. The other boys haven't done it. And you're not going to get more than 4. You're not going to get more than 4. You're not going to have 4 qualified and then get 2 more wildcards. It won't happen. So I would think that it'd be interesting to see if that's even discussed.
And interesting as well in the international, world, obviously discussions going on between various countries and Russia and all this kind of stuff. So, from politically, the landscape may yet change too. So there's actually 2 rounds left to go. But nonetheless, looking at the top, the shake-up, those the majority of those riders are already there or thereabouts. So, yes, Dudek's to lose, really. Indeed.
So we will watch that with interest and see how it transpires. But, no, interesting times. And we will, see how it goes. But the lineup for 26, possibly, just possibly, could be a little more attractive than the one we've had this year. To me, because with respect to Hülkenberg and Kvek and Anders Thompson, they haven't been very good this year. They haven't. And I don't know if they're suddenly going to be a lot better. I think Kvek, because of his age, has the potential to improve. But maybe a little time away. I reckon Martin Vashalik might get one. But after that, I couldn't tell you which way it's going to go. But back to the original point about the World Championship before we wrap it all up. I think that it is an exciting conclusion, and it's one that we haven't had for some time. Zmarzlik has wrapped up the previous 2 World Championships with a round to go, or at least he's been well comfortable going into the last one. But the fact of the matter is now that we have a proper contest, and Zmarzlik desperate to make it 6 and join the greats of Rickardson and Major, or will we see history made with a rookie coming through and winning? It's a great storyline either way.
Yeah, it's going the distance, and that's the main thing, and it'll all be wrapped up in Voyens at the end of the Grand Prix season, and then Speedway of Nations, but we'll surely catch up before then. Enjoy your last few meetings of the regular season before the playoffs, Kelvin.
I will try to. I've only got one, but I've only got one. But let's hope that the meeting, it's a standalone meeting. There's nothing on it. Let's hope that Oxford and Kings Lynn can put on a decent display. I'm not holding my breath, but we'll see how we get on. But 2 teams that have had disappointing campaigns, but the playoffs never generally. They always are terrific to look forward to, and every year since they've been introduced, they tend to the excitement, it attracts big crowds, and it's something to look forward to. So yeah, September's not too far away now.
Well, send my regards to Peter Schrock. I've seen his various teams race 5 times this month, and he hasn't won a single one while I've been there. So he's holding me personally responsible.
Yes.
Hopefully you can bring him some more luck.
Well, he'll be delighted that you're not there on Monday, of course. And he's pleased to see the back of you because you're some sort of curse for him. But yeah, Pete's a smashing bloke. I've known him since the mid-'80s, but he hasn't had a particularly great campaign. Certainly the Premiership team has been lacklustre. And I just hope that they can find it at home on Monday as they come towards the end of their campaign to give their fans something, just something to remember the season by. But it hasn't been great. But it's a smashing setup there at Oxford, and it's great that the place is open again. It's a good track, decent facilities. It's a nice place to go and watch Speedway, actually.
Certainly is. Well, and handy for the bus garage as well. So if you're a bus spotter, and then you've got all your dreams answered in one. Great stuff. Cheers, Kelvin, and we'll catch up again soon.
We will do.